our board meeting tonight. The large thing on our budget, or on the meeting, is regards to the 2021 budget. And I will turn this over to Tessa.
Thank you, Steve. Good evening, and thank you for joining us both online and in person here this evening. We are going to go ahead and call the meeting to order at 6:01 p.m. and notice was mailed out in accordance with Florida statute. And we do have a quorum of the directors present here this evening for tonight's meeting. So with that said, we can move into our new business items, and I'll turn that over to Krish for the review of the 2021 proposed budget.
Thank you, Tessa. Thank you, Tessa. I'm just going to stand up and talk today, okay? I hope you don't mind. Thanks to all those that attended the meetings that we had at the town halls for the budget. Today, I'm just going to cover most of that stuff in a slightly different fashion. And then, the next step is kind of asking the board for approval of that budget. Most of you, or all of you should have received the 2 sheets of paper at home. One is the proposed association budget that you should have received. And then we also sent out for the first time the reserve schedule that shows you all the items on the reserves. We sent both those items to every homeowner so that you have it. If you have them, it's great, follow up with it. What I'm going to do today is, as I told in those conversations, there are some small changes from what we sent out to what I'm going to present, and I'll highlight them to you. And we will redo the single pager and put it on the web, okay, so that you all can look at it. We're not going to redo the reserve schedule because it's the same thing. I'll just do the single pager. And from my perspective, what I'm going to tell you is a better news than what we sent out. So I hope people would be happy with that. So with that as the background, let me move on. When we talk of budget, people think of just numbers. What I'm here to tell you is, as part of the process we went through, we wanted to look at a little bit more than the numbers, actually. What we wanted to look at was, what was our mission as an association? And, as most of you know, we communicated that. Our mission actually is to protect and enhance the property values, all of our property values, and protect and enhance the assets we have, both on the club side and the golf side, and protect and enhance the quality of life. We said we wanted to take a look and say, how does the budget deliver on this thing? And what is that we're doing? And I'll share some examples of that to you. In addition to that, you actually gave us some significant input as part of the feedback that we have asked for, and you gave us some significant input on that. And I'm just listing those. And I'll try to say how many of these input points are being covered in the budget, actually. I think, which is nice, because you gave us a feedback, and we're starting to act on the feedback. Lastly, I've used this concept of benchmarks. We compared our budget with the RSM 2020 benchmarks. I know benchmarks are not absolutes. I fully understand that. They're more like goalposts or marks on the wall for us to compare, just to see where we are. It doesn't mean it dictates any way we change the directions, but it tells us where we are with the rest of the benchmarks. So that's the third part of the stool, if you want to call it, we have used as part of the budget process. So with that as the background, let me go at a very high level, show you first what the overall budget numbers look like. Okay, in this sheet, I'm showing you 2020 projections. That's for the full year, followed by the 2020 budget. At this stage, I understand it doesn't mean much to see 2020 budget, but at least you can compare. And then the 2021 budget. For 2020 projections, we are projecting somewhere in the order of about 9.8 million of income and roughly about 250,000 less in expenses. but we'll utilize that in other projects we have approved as part of the board. And we're also carrying forward about 175,000 into next year. The big chunk of it is I'll cover 120,000 will be from single-family home landscaping by not doing the mulch replacement now and carrying that forward. And the other 55,000 is mostly carrying forward the golf bag storage. And for the 6 months and the 6 months of the fitness memberships, we said we'll carry forward. That's where the 175 is coming from. The other thing you're all aware is we're starting this thing called improvement capital, which we didn't have. That's a capital fund we started without having any impact on your assessments. So this year's entire stuff that we got from working funds by the sale of existing homes that's paid by the purchaser at closing, that whole 150,000 will be moved into a separate bank account. And next year, we plan to do the same thing. So we have a capital improvement fund of close to $300,000, which is a starting point. It's not the end of all this, it's just a starting point. For 2021 budget, as we stand right now, it's about $10.7 million in revenue, roughly $10.7 million in expense. And the 150,000 as capital improvement is not included in any of them. It's a separate standalone item. Okay, leaves you at the bottom line about $26,000. People ask me, why doesn't it come down to zero? It's because we got to make an estimate of how many homes are going to be closed. And you can't keep repeating that cycle every time. So on a close to $10 million budget, we have something like 25. It's just a little bit gives you a breathing room if you want to call it. Okay, so the takeaway here is roughly 10.8 million, which equates to roughly a $900,000 business per month. Okay, I used to talk about $1 million business per month. It's just a little bit smaller, and I'll tell you why. Lastly, as you know, this year we've been adapting to the change with the COVID. And so as you go into 2021, the basis is first half of the year under COVID conditions and the second half without COVID. We'll wait and see how good that projection is, but that's the basis we have used in developing the budget. I have done this at a very high level of the 10.7 million roughly. I'm going to start the comparisons at a high level with the benchmarks first so that you all have an understanding first. Okay, before I compare, I just wanted to share with you a couple of things. First, the total number of members and the employees. Because the RSM benchmarks are specifically for bundled communities located in Southwest Florida. That means they're just our neighboring communities. There are about 25 of these communities they use in the benchmarking. So if you take a look, what I'm sharing with you on this slide, the green line is our budget projections for 2021, and the dark blue line is the benchmarks. So on number of total members, as you know, we'll have next year about 1,235. We won't have the still 1,250. When you refer to members here, they're members paying the full year assessment. So we might have close to 1,250, but all of them haven't paid the full year assessment. The other 25 communities on the average have about 990 members. So we're about 25% bigger compared to the average of the other communities in terms of members. Take a look on the top. It's the number of employees that are used. All these other communities with 990 members use about 99 employees. And we, with the 1,235, have only about 100 employees. So we have some benefits because of the lower number of employees in terms of a cost structure that comes with it. So just wanted to kind of share with you those, because certain amounts like assessments and revenue are direct function of the number of homes we have. So I will use that ratio of 1235 to 990 to scale up some of the benchmarks, because otherwise they're a direct function of the number of members you have, and that's what I would do. So this is the first step. So let's go and compare actual revenue and expenses. Color coding is same as I used in the last slide. Total revenue for 2021 is about 10.7 million in the budget. And the RSM benchmark says across all these 25 communities, the average revenue is 8 million roughly. But if you want to get to like our size, I scaled it up based on this ratio of the homes. And that tells you the revenue should be about 10 million for our size. That's what the benchmark is telling you. We're kind of right about there. It's a little bit higher, but the same thing. Same thing in expenses, which are on the top. Again, expenses are about 10.7 million. The scaled up thing says should be about 10 million again. So we're right on the track with the rest of the communities, how we look in terms of total revenue and expenses. Now let me break down the contributions of the revenue. Where is the revenue coming from, and how does that look versus the benchmarks? Colors are the same again. Assessments. 60% of our revenue comes from the assessments you all pay as part of the process. The benchmark says it's about 58%. Very similar again. Food and beverage revenue. Our budget for 2021, we have it about 21.5%. Okay? The benchmark says it's roughly 19% for other communities. Very similar again. And then golf plus activities. They don't separate golf, they combine golf with all the other activities they have. And the benchmark is 18.4, and ours in the budget says 18.2. Very similar in all this, not a big difference at all. Then the next one is I'm going to compare similar fashion expenses. Okay, here is where you find some differences. In the expenses, the payroll and related costs in our budget is about 34%. In other communities, it's about 52% of their entire expenses. Big difference. Cost of sales for food and beverage, very similar, about 8%. And operating costs, we are higher and other communities are lower. So I did have a conversation with RSM. What they told me was that when they come and audit, they're going to audit our finances at the end of this year. They will dig into more why we have these differences. They said, when you add up all this thing, you're very much like anybody else. So they said, let's dig a little bit more deeper to understand why the differences are there. Okay, so basically that's what we're going to do in terms of expenses. And so I gave you a high level on the benchmarks, and we are right there. Now I'm going to move into basically few items. One is because you saw the revenue, 60% of our revenue is assessments. The rest of the 40%, most of it comes from two categories, golf and food and beverage. So I'm going to dig a little bit deeper into golf and food and beverage so that all of you get an understanding. Okay, on the golf, I get a lot of questions, people giving me all sorts of ideas on how to calculate golf revenue. We do it in a very simple fashion. First, we got to project the rounds of member rounds and non-member rounds. You see it there. In 2021 budget, the basis is 38,000 rounds for members and about 10,000 rounds for non-members, a total of 48,000 roughly. That's the basis for the budget. That's a little bit lower than the current year, because I think even Sandy and I, when we had the town hall sessions, we communicated, we had some COVID positive impacts on the golf rounds this year. We think they're going to go away next year, so we kind of said we're just going to lower them a little bit. And the benchmark from the 25 communities, the average number of rounds these bundled communities have is about 43,000 rounds a year. Again, we are kind of within the same ballpark, 43 to 48. Okay, we're a little bit higher, but in the same range in terms of rounds. So once you know the rounds, if you can project what is the average fee you collect per round, you can then say, here is the revenue stream. So the next thing is, here is what I'm showing you, the average fees. I'm showing you here the average for the whole year. So next year, the projections are for the card fees about $20.6, which is the average between the 18-hole card fee, which is about 23, and the 9-hole card fee, it's 14. That average varies because I think the 9-hole rounds go up a little bit in the summer months, and then the 18-hole rounds go up in the high season. So that's what you see on the top. And the green fee is again an average of all the non-member categories. We don't budget by each category. We kind of say what is the average fee collected from all the non-member categories, and that's being projected for next year at $50.50 roughly. So when you have those two numbers and you multiply by the rounds that we talked of, you generate the revenue stream for the golf, the non-assessment revenue stream for the golf. Okay, so that is the basis. People keep asking me what these are. So these are the basis for golf. Okay, in a sense now, we have revenue, and I have the expenses, so I can calculate really what is the golf assessment going to be. This is the same format I will use on every one of the slides when we talk of assessment. You will see the first column is the 2020 projection, what it is for the full year. Then I'll show you the 2020 budget numbers. And then the last column is the 2021 budget. You can see on this slide, the golf operating expenses have not changed much. They're roughly similar between 2020 projections, budgets across, they don't change much. Golf maintenance expenses are pretty reasonably constant again. The only thing is, in the 2021 budget, we have added $80,000 more for projects for golf. That's the thing that I just wanted to kind of tell you. So that's the first difference compared to other years. And we'll talk of which projects and all in a minute. Then the expenses associated with the non-assessment revenue are roughly similar in terms of budget-wise from last year to this year. That leaves you a totally operating maintenance expense of about $2.3 million. And if you divide that by the total number of golf members who pay assessments, that means we have to estimate what that number is. And the estimated number for next year for golf members paying full year assessments is about 802 compared to 750 we budgeted for this year. That really equates to about $2,902 of golf assessment for the whole year, which compared to this year is about roughly $150 lower for golf assessments. Where is that most of it is coming from? Basically, it is coming from by keeping the costs constant, both expenses constant in terms of operations and maintenance, whereas the number of homes have gone up by 7%. So where the expenses have only gone up by about 2%. So that difference is what is contributing to reduction in the revenue, in the assessments. If you remember last year when we talked, I said, for the golf members, their assessments have increased by about $800 totally, combined all assessments, not just golf alone. And this is the first time you're seeing something coming back in terms of a reduction compared to last year's increase, okay? So that's the first step of the process in golf. One more item in golf, which is important because this is the cash flow flowing to HOA to offset HOA expenses. So this year they're projected to be about $1.51 million is the cash flow. And if you subtract the non-assessment revenue from it, what goes into HOA expenses to offset is about $1.1 million. I highlighted those two numbers in yellow, and they have changed slightly compared to what I have given you in the sheet. So I just want to point that out. I think what I've given you probably is about 1.54 million. It is in the single pages. They've changed right now. This does not have any impact on the golf assessment. And I'll show you what it did on the HOA assessment. Actually, it's positive on the HOA assessment too. So this really kind of says on the golf where we are and what we are projecting. So how does this compare with some of the things on the mission and the input you have given? One, by design, we are spending a lot more on maintenance of the golf course. That's by design. The reason we are doing that is so that we have a course and the condition that is where we all like to enjoy it and increases the value of our homes. So the way we can say we are spending more is the benchmarks say that the golf course maintenance cost per hole is about $88,000 across all these clubs. And we are spending close to $94,000 in our budget for next year. So that tells you we're spending about $6,000 more per hole, which equates to roughly $110,000 more. That should give us a golf course, according to Mickey and rest of the Icon crew, that is, a little bit better than rest of the golf courses that are floating around in the area. So that's by design, actually, to enhance the home values and the values of the community we live in. Why did we put in $80,000 for a project? One is, if you want to do, expand the driving range, that's one of the items. If we have money this year, we will expand it and it will come to that. Otherwise, it was meant for this. So if we spend that money this year to expand the driving range, the reason to do that is, if you do it next year, we do it right in the prime season of the golf course, okay, in the high season of the golf course. And there's a preference not to do it in the high season. So the best thing is to do it now if you wanted to do it. So if we find money this year to do it, then we'll utilize this money for any projects that we would have done this year, and we'll do them next year. So it's just a switch. But that's one of the things we put in the budget to kind of enhance. And then the project work will continue to improve the course drainage and also improving the bunkers. That's part of the money is coming from the construction defect funds. So that's not in the budget. That's coming from the construction defects. And the other thing that's been done is, based on the input from Mickey, we have actually updated the greens and the tees expected life. We kind of decreased them from 20 years to 15 because Mickey felt we will not get a 20-year life out of our greens and tees. So that's what has been done in the reserves and the sheets you've gotten. You would have seen the change. And lastly, we'll continue to address other golf issues that are quite complex based on your feedback. I just want to emphasize, we have addressed the golf cart lease expense because that's not anymore part of your assessment in golf. That's the first thing I want you to know. Second thing is, we have already addressed the non-member green fees very systematically and methodically, and those have been approved at a couple of board meetings ago. And we are reviewing options for other longer-term challenges that you all have brought out to us, and we'll continue to work with them. And sometime later, Sandy would talk to you the process that she's going to be using to address that. That really completes the golf, okay? So I told you what the assessments are going to be. I gave you an idea of what the revenue is going to be. I gave you an idea of how much flows into HOA to offset the HOA expenses. I'm going to move on to right now the food and beverage. I'm going to introduce a term called covers. For those of you that have not been in food and beverage, you say what it is. Okay, the covers is a concept of, if you want to call it in simple terms, of how many people are actually utilizing the facility, okay? And so the first concept is on Bama Bar. So this is for Bama Bar, average revenue per cover. How much revenue are we generating per cover? And you see 5 bars in each of the category. The first bar is for June, the second one is for July, Those are the actuals. August and September are also actuals. And the last bar is the proposed budget. So we're actually using our own data, like in golf, to set up a standard in terms of what is the revenue generation at Bahama Bar. And you can see what is happening. Bahama Bar, on the average, revenue per food is about $11. On beer, it's about close to $4 on the average. Liquor is about $4, and wine is somewhere in the $2 to $3 per cover. So you have a fair idea. If you know the number of covers, you can project actually what's the revenue from Bahama Bar with this approach. And a lot of credit to Icon for bringing this concept. And the data is the data from Sandra. She monitors this data pretty regularly on her stuff to monitor how many covers would they have and how is the revenue generation coming from. This is for the Bahama Bar. Okay, the next one. This is for the Culinary Center. The average food revenue is about $20. Beer, significantly lower than Bahama Bar, isn't it? So Bahama Bar seems to be preferred by the beer drinkers, and Culinary Center is preferred by the wine drinkers, okay, in this concept. So you can see wine and liquor are roughly the same, about $4 and the $20. So now you have the average revenue per cover from both the locations based on how you're using it. That's the uniqueness you said, and the uniqueness is coming out actually in the covers. So I showed you the average revenue. Now if I show you the number of covers, you can calculate the revenue for food and beverage. Here is the data for number of covers. Again, the months are the actuals. The first set is for Bahama Bar, and the second set is for Culinary Center. The Bahama Bar average covers that have been put in the budgets is about 3,500. And if you average across all the 4 months, it's roughly the same thing. In the Culinary Center, the average is running around 2,000, and we budgeted more close to 3,000 a month. That's because the Culinary Center is running at 50% capacity at this stage. So once the COVID conditions are removed, we hope that we'll get some more increase on the utilization. The 2021 budget numbers, both for revenue for cover and the number of covers, are seasonal. So I'm showing you the seasonal numbers here. So the high season, they change. So if you add up Bahama Bar and Culinary Center, they're about 6,500 covers per month, isn't it? So 3,500 for one and 3,000. So 6,500 covers per month. So we have the number of covers, we have the average revenue per cover, we can calculate the revenue. Before we go, I wanted to do a sanity check in terms of versus the benchmarks. Well, the 7,800 covers are there. What I told you is 6,500 a month times 12 gives you the 7,800 number for our 2021 budget. The RSM data says the covers in the other clubs are at 6,400. And remember, we have more members on the average versus the other clubs. So I scaled them up by the ratio of the members. And that tells you our number of covers for our membership should be close to 80,000. Again, we're in the same range. That's a sanity check that tells you the covers are right in the place. So we use our own data for average revenue per cover. The cover data has been validated. So now I'll show you the data for overall in terms of food and beverage. So you can see the comparisons from 2020 projections to 2021 budget. At the bottom line, 2020 projections are like about $490,000 of cash needed for entire food and beverage. That is compared to the budget, we had it at 160,000, but we all were aware, we've been conveying the data to you. Most of it is related to COVID, shutdowns for a couple of months of Bahama Bar, and then reduced capacity utilization at Culinary Center, and basically no banquet kind of market starting from about mid-March all the way to this month. We started some basic brief events starting this month. So that has led to the 490,000. If you compare that with the 2021 projections, the bottom line cash needs in food and beverage is about 208,000. That's what is being budgeted for 2021. If you take a look, the biggest change is they're expecting a good increase in the Bama Bar revenue, which is actually happening right now for the last couple of months. So under those conditions, that's pretty valid. Culinary center revenue increase, that's not that significant. They're showing some increase for next year, but not that significant because of the 6 months of COVID and 6 months of non-COVID conditions. Banquets, they're hoping to double what we can get from banquets next year. As you all know, we hired a banquet manager, and that should start the process. And I think initial successes are happening already. Isn't it the last 3 weeks? Every week we had a wedding, small weddings. So that's a good start in this month. The rest of it's the food and beverage cost of sales and food and beverage rest of the expenses are very much in line with the revenue. So remember this number, the cash needs for food and beverage are 208,000 as we look forward into next year, okay? So again, on food and beverage, what did we do in terms of kind of implementing the mission? So the revenue we budgeted for 2021 is based on the unique desires of how you're using the facilities. So we use that data to actually project the revenue. So we're actually listening to your unique desires on how you're using both these facilities. Secondly, I talked about this focused effort to increase the banquet revenue. Finally, we made one change. The food and beverage minimum will stay at 500 as we have right now, even though the benchmark data says for those 25 communities, the food and beverage minimum is 700. Even with that benchmark, we're going to stay at 500. We're going to expand the food and beverage minimum to include the beverages across both culinary center and the Bama Bar. The only difference from this year to next year in food and beverage minimum is your loyalty discount will not be available until you finish your food and beverage minimum. Until you spend your food and beverage minimum, then the loyalty discount of 15% will apply. It will not apply to the $500 of food and beverage minimum. That's a change. Next, in terms of the benchmark, these 25 communities in their food and beverage operations are actually putting a cash of close to $725,000 a year. Okay, this is during normal operation. This is not COVID conditions. In COVID conditions, we are at close to 500,000. We're doing significantly better. So when we get the next year benchmarks, that number would be significantly higher for the rest of these communities. And whereas we are budgeting only about 208,000, again, based on realistic data. So I think that's a good sign in terms of what it is. One shout out to Sandra. In terms of a good way or a way to manage food and beverage is to really manage your manpower costs. Because in food and beverage, somewhere 35 to 40% is your cost of sales, 50 to 55% is the cost of manpower. She has been managing the manpower very effectively actually in the last 3-4 months. That is part of the reason why we feel we can get to the levels that we are. So hats off to her on that aspect. Okay, I finished food and beverage. Let me move on to HOA common areas. What you'll find is, it was totally a surprise to me, these are the highest expense areas across all the communities, and there are no benchmarks. Okay, I don't know why they do it, but it looks like they can't cut the thing into various aspects to get a good look. So I have no benchmark data on HOA common areas, income and expenses. I'm comparing, like I was shown before, the 2020 projections to 2021 budget. I've taken this one cost center called HOA and divided it into three major expense areas. One is payroll and administrative expenses, and maintenance of buildings, gates, and pool, and then for common area landscaping. Those are the three big categories. And you see, very similar, except the payroll has slightly decreased from what this year's projection is versus next year. That's payroll plus administrative. Rest of them are similar. The landscaping expense for common areas has gone up slightly, and I'll get you a reason for that. Overall, at the bottom line, not a significant difference. Revenue, the revenue number for other than assessment has come down quite significantly. And the reason for that is basically this. One is, remember the working fund contributions by the sale of existing homes, we kept them separate. That revenue used to be here in this one. It's now not there, it's going a separate account. So that's one of the reasons for the revenue decrease. The second reason is the transponder revenue for next year, we've decided we're just going to sell the transponders at cost to the homeowners instead of they were being sold at twice the cost till now, how it was set up. So we said we're just going to sell the transponders at cost, and that's the other reason why the revenue is down. Next, we have enhanced the preventive maintenance contracts. That's the big reason for the increases you see. In terms of, for really pool maintenance, we went into what they call not a home vendor, but a commercial pool vendor in terms of doing the contracts. We added the HVAC contracts for all the units and refrigeration equipment contracts. So that kind of additional stuff that's being done. And finally, this budget includes for 2021 removal of existing mulch and replacing it with organic mulch for 50% of the common areas in 2021. And the remaining 50% will be done in 2022. So we split that project into 2 years because the feedback we're getting is removal of the mulch in November and December is the best time to do it. So if you're going to remove the existing mulch, then to replace it, it'll take a month or more after that. So that's the reason why the project time frame goes from November to February of 2022. And for 50% of the areas will be done. In addition, there'll be aerification of all the common areas again a second time. Once it was done this year, just last month, and they're going to redo the aerification for all the common areas next year. So that is in terms of the common areas. Now, very quickly to HOA activities. I use the term activities to include fitness, spa, racket sports, and lifestyle. All 4 areas are combined into one thing called activities, and that's the same thing you see in the monthlies that I put out. Not going to spend a lot of time here. So at the bottom line in fitness on the activities is they will need about $460,000 of cash infusion versus this year's actual projection of $420,000. This year, as you know, with COVID, we shut down. That's the first thing. Second thing is, unfortunately, we furloughed a number of employees at the same time. That contributed to the lower numbers. But compared to 2020 budget, I think this area combination, the amount of cash needs are significantly decreasing. And we're going to continue to look at avenues how to decrease the cash needs in these areas as we look forward. So I've given you the 3 major areas. Now we have the 3 major components: food and beverage, HOA common areas, and HOA activities. We can now calculate the HOA assessment. So if you remember, same format as before. So food and beverage cash needs for next year, $208,000. I showed you that. HOA common area cash needs of a little bit over $3 million. I showed you in a slide before. HOA activity cash needs of $461,000 roughly. If you add all of them up and then subtract from it, really, golf cash flow, when we're talking of golf, I showed you how much of that is coming to offset HOA expenses, about the $1.1 million. if you subtract that, it says HOA needs, cash needs of about 2.6 million. Same as golf, we got to project how many homes will be paying full year HOA assessment next year. We project that to be about 1,231 homes versus 1,179 for this year. That equates to annual HOA assessments of 2,141. This is different than what I sent in the single pager. This is actually takes the assessment down by about $15 for the whole year compared to this year. And the decreases are coming from mostly, you will see it, is golf cash flow. I showed you that on the golf slide, and also from common area cash needs, because if you remember, we gave a contract for next year for landscaping to a company called Down to Earth. That was after we sent the single pages out to you. They gave a proposal which is very attractive, and we put those numbers into this thing. That's what lowered all these numbers a little bit, okay? So that's where we are. So we covered two assessments, golf, HOA. Golf was lower by $150. HOA assessment is lower by $15 for the whole year. Let me move on to single family home. Now, before I do that, let me kind of finish with you the mission and the input that you have given. So to sustain the optimal asset performance, we're actually, spending money to enhance the preventive maintenance activities of the major items that we have in the common areas. Second, the budget includes removal of 50% of the common area mulch and replacing with an organic mulch, and aerification of all the common areas to further enhance the common area landscaping. Infrastructure group is actually working on final stages of recommending a community access project. And once we review that and approve it, it'll be funded from a combination of reserve and improvement funds. And that's why it's not in the budget for this year, but it's going to be funded from those two. And when I talk about reserves and improvement funds, you will see it. And there's a project to define the scope of lighting in several areas, including amenity center parking lot, mailboxes, and entry gates. There's a test at the mailboxes ongoing right now. Once the project scope is fully defined and approved, it'll be funded from the construction defect projects, and that's why you don't see any amounts in the budget for it. Lastly, we have budgeted for 2 signature events next year with a sign-up fee. That'll be in the second half of the year, because first half still COVID conditions, and we also filled the full-time life director position, so that way we can start the year in the second half with the activity sets we had before. So that's basically on the HOA. So let me move to single-family home landscaping. Here, again, the same format. You can see every item on single-family home landscaping are highlighted in yellow. That means they've all changed compared to last time. That's because of the down-to-earth contract. Their contract for landscaping has come down significantly compared to what we are projecting. Mulch removal and replacement, after we agreed with their contract and gave them the contract, I went back to them and said, could you please quote us for the mulch removal and replacement? Could you quote us for aerification? So now I find their numbers are a lot more competitive than what we had before. So I plugged in all their numbers into here. And repairs of irrigation systems, their contract actually includes some of the repairs of irrigation systems as part of the contract. So from the block valve at your home, all the way rest of your irrigation system at your home, their repairs and maintenance are covered by the contract. The association is now responsible from the main header up to the block valve in terms of repairs and maintenance. That was one irrigation system repairs and maintenance was significantly going up, and this gives us a chance to reduce those. We talked about adding one person in terms of being responsible for single-family home landscaping, and that person's payroll, overhead, and benefits is included in there. It brings the overall single-family home landscape expense to 1.44 million roughly. With that, and carryover of 120,000 from this year to next year, once you kind of plug that one in, here are the projected assessments for single-family home landscaping. Again, all of them have changed since I talked to you last time. They're all now down to the same levels as the current year. So there's no increase in single-family home landscape expenses for next year, even with all these projects that we're trying to do at the same time. So it's a way of managing in terms of not making an increase, but managing within the system of what we have and pulling the right levers to keep the assessments at where they are right now. Okay, so that is for single-family home. So we completed 3 assessments. The last one remaining is reserves. Okay. Reserves. Before I go into reserves, let me just say once again on mission-wise, I already covered that. Down to Earth is the landscaping contractor that we selected from the bids. The bids actually have enhanced requirements that was done by the landscaping group. So this bid has come lower at the enhanced requirements actually, which is nice to see, and we'll enjoy the fruits of those benefits as we go along. I talked about the following projects that are included, and the budget includes that individual we talked about. Basically, what we're saying is we have listened to you on single-family home landscaping, what to be done, and we incorporated all of that into the budget for next year without having to have any increase in that budget. Okay, now let's move to reserves. I know you can't read this thing, but you have a copy of this sheet at home. This is a pooled reserve kind of a thing, what's called reserve components, that is needed by the Florida statutes. If a component is not listed on this sheet, we can't use the reserve money for that. So one of the help I'm going to ask all of you is, as in your spare time, you look through that list, you find something in your walkthroughs to the community or in working with them that's missing, please let me know, okay? I believe we covered everything, but if you find something, let me know. We show for each of the items a remaining life in years and what is the estimated cost to replace it or refurbish it, depending on what we budgeted for. It's not always replacement. The estimated cost is for next year. It's not for, if the life is 25 years, the estimated cost is not 25 years later, it's for next year. The way we utilize that is we escalate it as we look into future years, or we will do another study to reestablish the baselines again. But if you take a look at all these, there are some items you will see with an estimated life of 0 on them. That means they're ripe for next year for being replaced if the decision is made. It doesn't mean we have to replace them, but if a decision is made, the money is available to replace them, and that's the purpose of the reserve fund. I'm not going into all the details on this one due to lack of time. What I want to show you is really here is the concept of what is happening in reserves. So if those of you that are following on the screen, the dashed line is the reserve spending year on year. And I take it to 30 years from now. That's how long it takes before we spend the money. For 30 years from now, and I keep telling you how much we're going to spend, and each year you see some spikes and then the valleys. That's actual spending. The line, the dark blue solid line here is the reserve assessments you're all paying. And I'll come back to that in a minute. And the green line, green solid line, is actually the balance remaining in the reserve account for us. So we build up our reserves. That's what we've been doing. From about a 1 million little bit, we'll build it up all the way up to about 3.5 million. And when we start to spend, it'll start to come down. The intent of your contributions is make sure that the green line never goes below 0. So you want to have some reserve money in your account. So the intent is the way I have projected for the next 30 years, the reserve assessments is a slowly stepwise increase in reserve assessments. It's right now 350, and we continue to increase in the next couple of years. By the end of 30 years, it may be close to $550 to $600, okay, at the end of 30 years. So that's how we are managing the reserves. And so here, for next year, we maintain the reserve assessments at the current level of $350,000. And the budget for next year includes to conduct a reserve study, which we'll be doing once every 3 years. And we'll use that reserve study to establish if the assessment collection is appropriate next year or not, or if you have to increase it, that'll be part of the 2022 budget. You have all seen and got a copy of the reserve schedule. And the reserve items that are planned to be implemented in 2021, once again, are listed on the schedule with the 0 expected life. The only other 2 items we will consider are gates and sidewalks for next year. So that total amount is $241,000. That'll be approved as part of the budget for reserves. Okay, it's coming out of the funds we have in the reserve account. So that really completes the reserves. So I've now completed all the 4 assessments, isn't it? We talked about golf, we talked about HOA, we talked about single-family home landscaping, and we talked about reserves. So now, this is the one benchmarking slide that comes out. It compares total out-of-pocket costs that each of you as members pay, which is golf assessment, HOA assessment, reserve assessment, home landscaping assessment you pay, food and beverage minimums you pay, including the 18% on the food and beverage minimum you pay as part of, so I've included everything that you have to pay the association for. And that number for 2021 for Esplanade is about $7,500, a little bit over $7,500. If you compare that with the RSM benchmarking data for the 25 communities, on the average, that number is close to $8,500. We are about $1,000 lower in the total annual cost to a member compared to the 25 other communities we have. So that should tell you the value of all this process that we're going through compared to other communities. Okay, I've completed the assessments and this thing, just a couple of slides on projects, and then we'll close this thing down. The slide I'm showing you, this is based on your feedback from the survey, and the slide was developed by the strategic planning group. So thanks to them first for that. So the slide on the horizontal axis shows you the overall importance. The importance is higher as you go towards the right on the thing. And on the vertical axis, how dissatisfied you are with the activity or with the asset. It doesn't matter how dissatisfied you are. So the higher you went, more dissatisfaction on the vertical axis. The further you went on the horizontal axis, how important it is to you, the higher importance. So basically what we are doing is, I called it phase 1. We've taken all those items in that area and says, how do we start to address it? So we're actually using your feedback as a prioritization on how we address all the issues that were brought up. So most of the items in phase 1 we're tackling as part of 2021. So as we go forward, we'll address the items below that, phase 2, and further phase 3. So we're kind of tackling all the input you've given, and we'll revalidate this input a couple of times next year and the following to see how the rest of the stuff falls. So based on this, here is the project funding proposals that we're going to use. Based on the project prioritization list I showed you, the following amounts are included in the budget. Single-family home landscaping, I already talked about it. Replacing existing mulch, replacing with the organic mulch. $142,000 roughly. And HOA, that's again for landscaping in terms of mulch and aeration, about $48,000 included. Golf, we already talked about, I showed you $80,000 included. So all these amounts of roughly close to, $270,000 is included in the budget, actually. And next, improvement project funds. I told you already, 150,000 from this year is carrying forward. We collect another 150,000, but some of that in the later months we won't be able to use next year. So I'm suggesting that we'll have about 250,000 available for improvement funds in this process for next year. What are we going to use? Based on your feedback, you kind of said you wanted to see some improvements in the Bahama Bar facilities. Gates improvement, we talked about. The pickleball shelter is a request. Amenity center upgrade was your feedback. Tennis projects was a request from them to consolidate the third-party software we have into a common system and other things. These are just a current list of projects. That doesn't mean they're going to get done or anything. There's just a current list that we're going to use out of the improvement projects. There might not be sufficient funds there to get all these done, first of all. So the board, as they go along, will look at these lists and other priorities that come through and select which projects we'll fund from the improvement part of the system. And lastly, golf drainage, bunkers, and the lighting project, as I told you, will be funded from the construction defect funds. So that gives you an idea of the project side of the equation. So closing it down, ultimately you're all interested in what do you pay quarterly? Here is what the sheet is. If you're a club member or an original resident member, that's the first two columns. The first column there is 2020 what you're paying, and the proposed 2021 assessment. And then for the golf members in the same fashion, you pay your assessment based on the lot size. The good news is every number in 2021 is lower than the number in 2020. So your payments for every one of you are lower than what you're paying in the current year. It may be small in some cases, I know, but it's still lower. I think under these conditions, very few associations can say that they're actually lowering their assessments, okay? So with that, that really completes it. So in closing, I hope I shared with you what I call a more realistic 2021 budget based on a very sound basis. And it includes several aspects of our mission. I showed that to you along the way. And projects to address number of the dissatisfaction items you kind of gave us input. And includes the first year of a 2-year program to enhance common area and single-family home landscaping. It commences a routine process to contribute to the improvement funds. Okay, it's just a start, as I said. And benchmarking data reinforces our basis, and in several areas identifies opportunities for further exploration. Lastly, the total assessment costs for members are lower than the other bundled communities in Southwest Florida. With that, I complete it, and then I can make a proposal for the board to approve. So my notification is approve the budget as requested in terms of assessments and revenue as given out, under the condition that we give the homeowners back an updated single-page sheet. And that's the proposal, to approve the budget on that basis.
Okay,
Thank you.
first of all, thank you, Krish. That was a very in-depth and robust review. It also demonstrates to the community our commitment to do what's right for the community in regards to improvement, to maintaining value, and enhancing the Esplanade experience. And we appreciate everyone's contribution through the process. And again, thank you also, ICON, for all your contributions and your execution for next year. So with that, we do have a motion. If you made a motion, do we have a second? Second. Oh, wait a minute.
Second.
There's discussion here that Krish first said a proposal. The appropriate terminology would be a motion. So,
Thank you, Tessa, for keeping us on track. Okay.
I was like, wait, what's happening? Okay, so let's just back up just a little bit because I think we've got 3 items that the board was gonna maybe discuss before that motion goes on the table. So there's those 3 items first. But before we go there, I would like to open up for questions from the audience that are here in person, all 6 of you. Thank you for joining us. Is there anybody in the audience here that has a question or a budget question that they would like answered before we move forward? And if you could, can you come up to the microphone here? That way our online guests can hear you as well.
Bob Inderbitson, I'm a relatively recent member, started the beginning of this year. My wife and I live on Fontana Loop. My question has to do with the PPP funds. It looks like there was about $300,000 to $400,000 of hurt that could be directly associated with COVID. There wasn't enough detail to see if that was employees and that, but I know you returned those funds. But wasn't there an opportunity to use some of those funds before, as part of that check that was received? And maybe you've answered that before, but I hadn't heard it.
It's okay, I don't mind answering it again, but thank you for asking, for your input. The PPP program is based on some fundamental criteria. The first fundamental criteria is that the business has an economic need. If the business does not have an economic need, the program clearly says you better return all the funds. So I don't think we could show for our business an economic need based on the current year performance, where our positive cash flow has been running around $400,000. So with that, we cannot show that there was an economic need in the business to actually tap onto the funds. That's the first thing. Second thing, the requirements of PPP, the second requirement is that we do not have access to capital from any other source. Fortunately or unfortunately, however you want to look at it for us, the same week we had our PPP funds approved, we also had a line of credit approved from a bank. So we had sourced to funds from other than PPP. Because of those 2 conditions, the board discussed and said, we should return the money because we're not meeting the basic requirements of PPP loan for a business. Hope it answered your question.
thank you.
Any other questions from the audience present? Okay, with that said, we do have a few questions on the live feed. Fred Williamson is asking, how much profit is generated by banquets after food, labor, and banquet director costs?
I could not. We couldn't hear your question. Can you repeat that, please, without the math?
Yes. Fred Williamson is asking, how much profit is generated by banquets after food, labor, and banquet director costs?
I couldn't still hear the question.
I heard the question. The question was, how much do we make in banquets after subtracting costs? That's a variable.
No, it's pretty reasonably fixed. I can give a shout out to the person that has done all the work and thank Duane, who's sitting in the back. Duane, do you remember that number we budgeted? I think it's a lot better than the regular food. We have a lot higher margin on the banquets. I don't remember that number exactly right now. Okay. Thank you. Fred, first of all, welcome back from the north. Good. Hope you're seeing the good weather up here. So thanks for the question. The answer is on banquets, I believe it's a 10 to 15% margin. That's better than anything else that we see in the rest of the food area. Thank you, Duane.
Katie Scarfone is asking, does RSM benchmark have an average round of golf? And if so, what is it?
When you say average round of golf, I do not know. I shared the data that says RSM benchmark says 43,000 rounds a year per golf in other communities on the average, and we have about 48,000 rounds on the average. If she's referring to average price or fee collected per round, the benchmarking data from RSM doesn't provide that at this stage. That's something we'll be asking them if they can add it for next year.
Okay, thank you. Mike Coslow is asking, have these numbers been reviewed by the CPAs at ICON? And I can say yes, that we've,
sorry.
if ICON CPAs have reviewed the budget.
ICON has, in essence, let me take a minute, okay? ICON has actually developed all the budget this year. So hats off to Duane, who is sitting in the back, and Hector, who has contributed quite a bit, and rest of Bobby's team who participated in the process. But they have done the heavy lifting this year, so thank you for that.
You're welcome. Jean Levine is asking, there is a significant decrease in budgeting for HOA activities. Why?
Two reasons. One, significant decrease in both in expenses and revenue because the first 6 months is under COVID conditions. So there are no activities in lifestyle, those kind of things in the first 6 months. We did not put anything in. So it's only for the next 6 months. Generally, we hold 4 to 5 signature events. Generally, historically, that's what we have done. And next year, I've communicated is only 2 of them. And on expense side, there's been heavy focus actually in monitoring the expenses and the activities to reduce the cash needs. And that's the result you're actually seeing right now.
Thank you, Krish.
I'd like to add that
Sure.
there probably will be self-funded events from a lifestyle standpoint where folks, there'd be events where you would pay for an event. And so those will be, there will be activities, but most of those will be self-funded through the first 6 months.
Thank you. Mike Kovac asks, can you expand on how and when the mulch will be removed and added? Is there a schedule for the homes for the mulch?
The current plan is that the mulch would be removed next year starting about November timeframe. The reason is this, because we pay for removal of the mulch, the more you allow the existing mulch to degrade, the lesser we spend on removing it. Okay, so that's the first reason why that is that far. The second reason is, that's the reason why we're not planning to spend replenishing mulch this year, because it'll take more time to degrade. So we're pouring good money over what we're going to remove. So we're waiting till next year for 2 things. One is let it degrade as much as we can so we can reduce the removal costs of the mulch. That's the basic reason for the time frame.
Thank you. Bonnie Richardson is asking, has a full reserve study ever been done in our community?
Yes, a full reserve study was done last year as part of the transition from Taylor Morrison, and that was done by Delta Engineering back in October or November last.
The year before.
Oh, the year before.
So, yeah.
So every 3 years, as Krish mentioned, a reserve review will be done. And 2 years ago, Taylor Morrison has done that, and now we're planning in our budget to have it done in 2021, an update.
Thank you. Mike Rappaport is asking, are the condos included in budgeting decisions?
Are what included? Condos, absolutely. Condos pay. I hope I communicated that in the slide. Condos pay for both for HOA and reserves. And so they're included in those 2 categories. If they're golf members, they're included in there. The only place condos are not included is in the single family home landscaping. Other than that, depending on the membership level, they are included, please.
And they do have a separate budget through their own association for...
In addition to this, they have their own separate budget for each of their own condo associations. Yes, please. Thank you for that.
Yes. Greg Hetrick is asking, what communities make up the 25 RSM benchmark communities?
Thank you for asking. I've asked that question. They said, no, not at this stage of giving me the names, okay? So that's all I can do at this stage. We asked them and they declined. They said they don't give it to any of the communities what the names of the other communities are.
Thank you. Eileen Gelber has stated, we have a 45-foot lot, and this year we are paying $970 a quarter, not $974, or not $964.
Huh. I got to take that offline and answer that.
Okay.
I don't understand why. So it may be
Sure.
something on how we are billing.
Okay, fair enough.
Okay, the booklet might have the wrong number and it's never got checked out. So please ask her. We'll address with her offline and what
Okay.
that's about. Okay, thank you.
Perfect. Jean Levine, according to the proposal sent to us earlier, there is a decrease in golf revenue funding the HOA by about $180,000, and also a decrease in spending for HOA activities by about $260,000. It would seem that that means less cash flowing from golf revenue is directly affecting lifestyle wellness. What is being eliminated from the activities budgets?
I'm missing those numbers. All I can tell you is, as I said in my presentation, the only decrease from the golf cash flow going to HOA is a $30,000 reduction, because I have the single pager in front of me. The single pager that was sent out to all the homeowners says golf cash to offset HOA expenses is $1.125 million. What I showed you was $1.095 million. So that's 30,000 difference. So I don't know about what the other numbers they're talking about. If they're comparing with something else, that could be different. I'm comparing with just the 2021 proposal. That's the only difference. Even with that decrease, the assessment for HOA has gone down compared to what we sent last time. The assessment last time was $6 higher for the whole year than, and this year we're actually showing it's less, because last time when I sent it, it was $2,162 of assessment for HOA. Now this latest projection says $2,141. So assessment has come down, even though that revenue has come down on the golf side. So that is, if she's talking of the difference between the 2020 approved budget to 2021 proposed budget, then that's a valid question. Remember, the 2020 approved budget was prior to COVID conditions, and we had a lot of stuff in and that we did not utilize. So as I said in the very beginning, the 2020 approved budget is not a good benchmark to compare as we go through this, because we had so many items that we never got a chance to actually implement or use. So more, it's the 2020 actuals that I put out that are not in this sheet that are more driving where we are going in terms of it. Okay, thank you for that.
Thank you. John Bailey is asking, do other benchmark communities have revenue to offset HOA fees similar to the golf revenue surplus used here to offset Esplanade HOA?
From what I understand, every bundled community utilizes golf revenue to some percentage to offset HOA expenses. The only difference that I am aware of is every other bundled community board of directors have the right to say where those offsets will go. Whereas in our community, the declarations say where the offsets go. That is the biggest difference. Okay, but every bundled community uses certain percentage of the golf revenue to offset HOA expenses.
Thank you. Walter Clark says, playing golf 2 times a week costs another $2,500. I think that is excess. That one doesn't have a last name. I think that's all we have on here for right now. We have a couple without last names, so I'll see if they can pop in as part of, get me their names before we finish the discussion, and if they do, I'll let you know. I don't see any other questions at this time, so with that said, I would say that the board can move into discussing the first item under review of the budget, which is the mulch.
Well, on the mulch, I already kind of communicated. So all we're going to do at this stage is the budget is set for organic mulch. So we have a couple of choices in the organic mulch. We can go with Melaleuca or eucalyptus. That decision would be made very quickly. When I say quickly, we'd like to have down to earth involved in giving us that information. There is a definite need, I understand, from setting standards for the community to have it done earlier. And we're going to work towards that to see when we can have that decision made. And I did ask down to earth today, I said, is that possible if we set one right now and we change it? Their view was very simple. They said, hey, just use with your existing mulch if you're going to change it, and let's do it at one time, because their view is we're not going to get any reduction in price by not having 100 homes being done. That's basically what they're communicating. I understand from a standards point of view, it's good to have it. So what we have to do as a board at the next meeting is kind of get DTE and other people in and make the decision if it's going to be between one or the other, between either Melaleuca or eucalyptus.
So just so you know, it's on the agenda as a point of explanation, not necessarily something that is going to impact the budget at all. But as Chris mentioned, we need to make a determination. So from a standards perspective, ARC perspective, when people change their landscaping, there'll be a standard mulch, and we're trying to work, as Chris said, with down to earth to make that determination as quickly as we can. Jim, you have any comment?
Yeah, I do want.
I don't think you're on.
I do want to say that it's really important that we get this done fast, because just today we had, I think it was 9 landscape requests. In the last 3 meetings, we've had 30 landscape requests. The problem is these people may be replacing mulch. And if they're not replacing, if we go to eucalyptus or Melaleuca and they put something else in, they're paying money to have this done. And if we come out with another one that we're gonna go with, are we gonna pull what they just paid to have done? You know, if someone spent $300 to put in whatever it is, you know, in 6 months, are we gonna pull it out after the fact that they've spent the money for something we're not gonna allow? Or are we gonna grandfather it and say, you can have that? I'm just saying, there's an issue there where residents are paying money for landscape, and we haven't made the commitment yet.
What I'll say to that is it's a question for another meeting, not necessarily this budget, but we need to resolve that, and it's part of our decision in regards to what mulch we'll use. But if you would, we would like to defer that question to when we do have that meeting of the mulch. Okay.
Any other comments on the mulch, or are we ready to move on to the 2021 member cart fee program?
Let's move on.
Okay. Who's taking the lead on that? Sandy?
Okay, so the current cart fee was already baked into the 2021 budget, but at our last meeting, I was asked to work with ICON and come back with a proposal to the board for a placeholder dollar amount for the 2021 budget to address a cart fee discount or some sort of trail fee program. And so what we did is I worked with ICON, and they went out and found 7 like communities. So they were bundled communities that were already turned over, with one exception. Esplanade Naples was the only one that was not turned over. So I asked that they look at an annual trail fee using their existing club carts I asked that they look at any other types of cart discount programs, any other frequent golfer cart programs that similar clubs have in place, and a private cart trail fee when they looked at all of these different options. What they found was that none of the clubs that they spoke to had an annual trail fee using club carts. None of the clubs had a cart discount program for frequent golfers, and 3 clubs did allow private carts. Of the 3 clubs, 2 clubs that allowed private carts, the members pay the same daily cart fee as members using the club carts. The only one that they came across in this analysis was Naples Esplanade did implement a personal cart trail fee, and it's $2,000 a year, and I believe the fee for the GPS lease will be $380 in addition to that $2,000 a year. However, they have not been able to get the GPS units because of the high demand during COVID. So they signed an agreement and they will be able to use personal carts, but when the GPS becomes available, they will have to have the GPS installed in their personal carts. And approximately 14% of the golf members at Esplanade are participating in that program. So we also asked Icon to look at GPS for our carts, and our vendor does not have GPS available to lease. So in order for us to be able to install GPS in personal carts, it would be about $1,800 per cart installed, and that does not include any software updates that come throughout the year, if they would even be able to supply the carts. Another issue with the GPS systems is they're proprietary. So if we were to change cart vendors when our lease runs out, we would have to have members then get the new software or the new GPS system and software installed from the new vendor. So overall, from the comparison, the light clubs that they spoke to don't offer any discounts for use of the fleet carts. The majority do not permit private carts, and the ones that are turned over only offer pay-as-you-go option for personal carts. So the cart fee for 2021 for members will remain at $23. We are going to continue to allow private carts during COVID at the current daily cost of $23, which will likely be through the 2021 high season. What we want to do is ensure that when we get into the high season, that members still have access. We could potentially get into another more restrictive phase of COVID. So the decision is that we're going to continue to allow personal carts. Icon has also proposed that we offer a training and certification for those who want to utilize their personal carts. We've had, unfortunately, some abuses on the course, individuals using their personal carts. I get a text message with pictures almost daily, and I know Icon gets a lot of those as well. So we feel it's necessary. Mickey and his crew have done an outstanding job beautifying the course and bringing it back to excellent condition. So we want to make sure that we continue that. So we're going to ask that all members who wish to utilize their personal cart going into 2021 during COVID, that they go through this training, and at that point, the staff will also inspect the carts to ensure that they're compliant with all of our personal cart requirements for driving them on the course. So since we had such a short turnaround time to complete this analysis, I think, based on all the feedback that we've been given, we really need to take a more in-depth look at different cart program options. So we're going to go back with Icon and put a small task team in place to evaluate our program, how it compares to other clubs, and look at trail fees, private cart fees, with and without GPS, and any other cart programs. This will also give us the opportunity, because we've heard a lot of feedback from the community, it'll give us the opportunity to sort of listen and learn more from a broader segment of the community. So we're hoping that we can get together some focus groups and hear some input and feedback from the community on if we are to offer these types of cart programs, what would be appealing what would be reasonable and what would members be interested in participating in terms of those types of programs. So we are going to continue that work, and I think we should have something mid to late January that we can come back to the community and report on.
Thank you.
Okay, we don't have any questions on that item, so then it looks like we are ready to move forward with the vote on the proposed budget.
All right, now that we've accomplished those subsets, do we have a motion about the budget?
I make a motion that we approve the budget as presented in terms of revenue, expenses, and also in terms of assessments as presented. And the project list that was given for reserves will become part of the budget, so that you don't have to approve all the reserve projects again and again. That's the basis.
All right, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
I second it.
We have a motion and a second. Do we have any discussion? With no discussion, let's vote. Those in favor of the proposed budget for 2021 signify by raising your hands. Aye?
Aye.
Motion approved. Thank you, Krish, for all your work, and we have a lot of work ahead of us.
Steve, I just want to again thank Dwayne and rest of the ICON team for what they have done. What we have agreed is, since the budget has been approved, we will post a single pager modified to reflect what we have agreed onto the website. So we won't plan to send a single pager to every home again. It'll be on the website so they can take a look of the approved budget. So
that'll work. Okay. Next subject.
All right, next item under new business then is the transfer of golf privileges to renters.
I think I'll take that one. This has to do with, I'd like to revisit a portion of our golf fees that we agreed to several meetings ago. It has to do with the privileges that a golf member, owner of a condo or house, I guess it doesn't matter, who transfers their privileges to a renter, and those privileges would include all of the privileges that they have for golf. And we set a new rate. The current rate was $23, which is the same rate that a golf member has if they were going to use a cart. After kind of a review, I thought about this. One of the things that we always pride ourselves on is to try to get as much data as possible about making a decision. If you work with Krish, he always asks you what the basis is and do you have enough data. And in this particular situation, we found out that it's no surprise that Pope did not really capture the rounds done by golf members who transfer to renters. So the renter rounds we didn't know. We don't really know. And at this point, I don't think we have enough data to make any type of decision. What ICON will be able to do, they're going to do a much better job, and we'll be able to identify those rounds specifically, and then especially through the season, and see how many rounds those folks may use. At that point in time, we could always talk and also collaborate with the condo association presidents as to what would make the most sense going forward. So my motion is to refer back or to defer any type of rate change and use the current rate of $23 for those golf members who transfer their privileges to a renter. That is my motion. Do I have a second?
I'll second that motion.
Any discussion? Without any discussion,
One thing I think we just need to, when we look at the rates, the renter rate, if the privileges aren't transferred, will remain the same as a golf member guest and as a club member at $89. I just want to make sure that doesn't get lost in the translation.
We understand that. I understand that. So, any other discussion?
Just a question, just to clarify. So what we're voting on right now is if a Gulf member rents their house or condo to a renter, the renter will pay the same fee as the Gulf member now pays.
That's correct.
Okay, all right. Just wanted to confirm that.
So,
Steve, is there any reason why we have to make the decision for that today? Because it doesn't go into effect till January, first kind of a time frame. I'm just asking because let's get one more view from the attorney, clearly, specifically asking what it is that's there, so that we can vote on it at the next meeting, if that's okay with the rest of the members. I'm just thinking of why do we have to do that today, because it doesn't go into effect till January 1st.
I understand your position. The reason why I put it on the agenda today is that we have to have it done before the effective date of the new rates, which would be January 1st. This was a meeting that you have to do this in an open meeting, so I decided to bring it up at this particular meeting.
No, I fully understand. Thank you for doing that. All I'm asking is, do we have to make the decision today, or can we wait till the next meeting? Just a suggestion I'm making, really, to the rest of the folks.
Well, there'd be no reason why we couldn't change it, even in December, if we found out something was different. I'm just saying, we can do it now, but we can also change it later on. It's not like it's stuck where it is.
Are we confident we'll have another meeting between now and the end of the year?
Possible.
At least one?
Well, at this point, I understand what you're saying. We got a motion on the floor. We had a second. We had discussion. Any other discussion? Okay, then let's vote. All those in...
Harris, and I don't have a house that I rent. I don't have a condo that I rent. However, we represent, as the board, you represent investors as well as homeowners. My thought, if deferring this, if you defer it, there are people who are signing leases for their houses, and their renters are under the impression that the rate they're going to be paying is $23. And if you change that, you're basically screwing the owner of that house, because now they're not going to be able to make the money they thought that they were going to make through that investment. So as you defer that, and they're signing leases today, and then you're going to defer your decision till later, it makes it very difficult for them to rent their property.
That's a good point. I think if I was speculating, what would happen if there was agreement to use the current rate, that rate would be effective for those folks that have contracts through next year.
I would hope so, but
Well,
that's if you include it, yeah.
That's a reasonable expectation. Any further discussion?
Just a question. So that means that any lease that's gone into will be honored for next rentals for next season?
So I need to, based on what you're saying, then I need to change my motion. What's your question for Parat?
I was just going to clarify that we will resolve this before December 31st. That's part of the motion. Basically, you're deferring it, but we'll have a decision before December 31st when the proposed.
No, I'm sorry, I'll make my motion a lot clearer. My motion is to defer till we get data based on a whole season of rounds to determine how many of these renters are using the facilities, and then discuss what we should do, which would, in my mind, or what the motion will be, is to make this part of the 2022 budget, not the 2021 budget. So my deferral motion is for the entire year.
Second.
Any discussion about this clarification? If none, let's vote. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Yes. Motion passes. Next issue. Okay, we're going to go into unfinished business. Thank you.
Just a couple of items that are popping up on the feed, because obviously we have a minute and a half delay, so some people are just asking for some questions of clarification on a couple of items. Mike Coslow's asking, why isn't the golf committee doing the study and making the recommendation? I believe this is referring to the trail fees. The question was, why isn't the golf committee doing the study and making the recommendation on the cart trail fees, I believe is what that came in for.
Yeah, so that came up at the last meeting that we had around the budget. And the request from Krish was that we come back to him with a proposal regarding cart programs. And given the tight turnaround time, ICON offered to take this upon themselves and consult with their corporate offices as well as the other clubs that they manage so that we could quickly get back to Krish if we were going to add a placeholder dollar amount into the 2021 budget.
Thank you. Fred Williamson is stating River Strand has a one-time transfer fee of $125. Why don't we do something similar? I believe that's referring to the renter piece that you were just talking about. We're going to be bouncing around a little bit here now because with the delay.
We will do some research, but I believe we do have a transfer fee.
Yeah, I think, and I believe it's $100 to transfer the club membership and $150 to transfer the golf membership. So if you're a golf member, the total is $250.
Thank you, Tessa.
My pleasure. My pleasure, Steve. John Downs is asking how many times a year can you transfer? I presume that means how many times can you delegate your privileges to a renter. If you are in a single family home, you can do that 4 times per year. If you are in a condominium, you can do that 5 times per year with a minimum of a 1-month rental. Tim Lawson is stating there is no legal issue here. We currently allow renters to have the same rate as an owner, so we should not change. And Michael Napoli is asking, will there be different rates for annual renters as opposed to seasonal, I suppose?
No. Once it's transferred, it doesn't matter the term.
Okay. All right, I think we're good. My apologies. Unfinished business is our next item. First item is review of construction defect project status. We've got a few items listed there. Who's taking the acoustic contract?
I'd like to say something before we get started. I have a topic we need to clarify from last meeting before we get to the motions and voting. This is not required. At the last meeting, I made the comment that the acoustic panels put in the bar area were 80% of the recommended amount. And that's the data I had at the time from the proposal that was offered. They came back, I didn't have this data, but they came back and sent different square footage for the bar dining area. And it turns out that the square footage being installed is actually 2% over. I'm simply saying that. There's no motion, no vote, anything like that. Just for the record, that the amount that's being installed meets the second requirements that the group had put in. Okay, and I guess I'll just move on here. We've already approved phases 1 and 2, which are the bar dining area and the main dining. There's 3, 4, 5, and 6. I'm going to propose we just go through each one and vote them up or down. In other words, the next phase is the private dining area, which would be phase 3. It's for $23,750. I make a motion that we approve the acoustics improvement project for phase 3.
We have a motion for...
Second.
So we have a first and second motion. The discussion is regarding to the approval of going forward with phase 3, which is the private dining area for $27,000?
$23,750.
$23,750. So any discussion? Okay.
Quick question. But if per chance one of these 4 items does not get approved, would it affect the pricing of any of the ones we do approve? Suppose we get 3, 4, 5, and 6. If we pass 3 and 4, but not 5 or 6, are they standalone contracts? That's what I'm asking. Are all 4 of these standalone contracts?
I have a copy of the signed contract, and it is broken down by the 6 sections. And I will read through it again, Jim. But the contract sum, phase costs, and they have each one. There's nothing in the contract that says if we do not do all 6, that the other items will come in at a higher number. But it's a good question, and we should confirm that. Good question.
I don't think we need to confirm it because the contract is written in phases. So you can, and if you say at the end of phase 3, we're not releasing anything, we've already agreed on the pricing for phase 1 and 3 and the payments. I think that's the end of it at that stage. They can claim some damages, but the contract doesn't say that any damages are eligible.
I confer with Krish. I think they're standalone. And we've done the first 2 phases and now the 3rd stage. But if it's a good question, but involved in the process, I would say that they're standalone. And any other conversation, any other discussion? Okay. Without any further discussion, let's vote. Those in favor of approving phase 3 for the acoustics in the culinary center, which would be the private dining area, please raise your hand and signify aye. Aye. Motion carries. Next issue.
Okay, I make a motion to approve phase 4 for the acoustics improvement project, which is the wine room, for a cost of $27,120.
Do I have a second?
Second that motion.
Any discussion in regards to the wine room acoustics?
But my suggestion is this: that room is not really utilized that heavily, first of all. And if you cover the entire main dining area and the bar area, which is really the maximum usage, and in my view, that small area to spend $27,000 at this stage, without fully understanding how we're going to utilize it in the future and what revenue capabilities it has, I believe my suggestion is we delay that phase and other phases after that.
If I may, I would like to get a commentary from ICON in regards to the utilization, or what your in anticipation utilization is for that wine and teaching area, or demonstration area as they called it.
Yeah, thank you, Steve. Obviously the challenge right now being COVID, we hope that, in the coming year when there's a vaccine or COVID is behind us, it's not right now, but our hope is that we can do more wine pairing dinners. We can do some cooking classes, some chef tables in there. We have not been able to have the opportunity to do that with the exception of some wine tasting so far. But that is our hope next year as we go in, again, life after COVID is, that would be our hope. That would be our assumptions and expectations.
The only comment I'll make on it is you know, we intend to go through phases 5 and 6 as well. Even though I may be making the motion to approve, I may not. There are valid arguments to do it and not do it, and I might not even be on that side. The only thing I would probably caution us on is the chances of having them leave and come back. I would think they would want to renegotiate the costs at that time. So I'm thinking once they do the work here, whatever phases we decide on today, when they leave, that will probably be the end. And if we want to have them come back later and do other costs, they will most likely want to renegotiate. That's just something we need to consider in this evaluation.
I'm sure there would be a question. Oh, no, go ahead, Chris.
The question I have, Bobby, is even if you're going to use it, what is the expectation of maximum number of people in that room at any one time? I think that's really what kind of serves the point. You know, if you're not going to have a lot of people, why are we spending $30,000 roughly or $27,000 with a margin of less than few percent? We'll never recoup this thing out of that area.
Yeah, I don't disagree with your comments. It's a very small space. When there's a cooking class in there, you have one person speaking. I'm just trying to answer the question. I'm trying to stay in the middle of the road, but I don't disagree with your comments, Chris.
So, Bob, if that's what you're going to propose, 6 sequential proposals here, so what's the total amount that we're looking for, you know, with
The motion right now is for the wine room, which is $27,120. Now, if you look at the total cost of all the phases, it's just under $250,000. But I can assure you, when we get to the further phases, I doubt the board, we may not have the support we need. But coming back to Krish's question, I was just in the wine room recently for a meeting. I think it was on the gate system with the infrastructure group, and I mean, there were only 6 people in the room, but boy, you could hardly hear each other. You know, regardless of the number of people in there, I think without doing this, it's really not that functional a room. That's just my opinion.
I would agree. I'd rather see the room done and just have it as all the eating areas are uniform, are done, and usable. When we get to the halls and the 5th and 6th phase, that I have a lot of questions about the utility of it. But certainly for the wine room, I would suggest doing it.
Bobby, a question. For events and banquets, is that space used at all or could be used?
It absolutely can be used, yes.
Okay, that makes a significant difference.
So if I would, I'm not making a suggestion, just making some comments here and not necessarily a question, or some question is it useful to have the spaces that are occupied by people, meaning that they could sit there and enjoy whatever they're enjoying? Should those spaces be completed in this acoustical project? That's a question and up for debate. And as you all know, the funding of all this is part of the construction defect fund. It's not in the budgets at all. But not that it makes a big difference. We have to make the right decision, but that's another information for folks. Do we have any other discussion?
I had another question, Bob. What about the pizza room? Is that included under any of the phases?
No, it is not at this time.
I'd rather see the hall swapped for the pizza room.
It's something, Alan, one thing I didn't bring up today that I don't want to muddy the waters too much. I mean, it would be we could certainly maybe consider it for while they're here working on phases 3 and or 4, whether it's worthwhile to do that. But we've also deferred from the last meeting. We don't really need a board vote on it, but I'll throw it out. It's about, I believe, $2,000 to get a quantitative analysis of the results of this. We know we want to be, I think it's between 0.6 and 0.8 seconds reverberation rate. There are good arguments to do it and not do it. In other words, the good arguments to do it are we have a quantifiable results based on the testing. The reason not to do it is, regardless of the results, we're not going to do anything with that information other than put it in the record. In other words, the company putting in the acoustics have met all the needs, so we're not going to use that in anything other than have it for the records. But and that's something also. I don't want to muddy the waters with phase 3 right now on this, or I guess we're on phase 4. But no, back to your question, no. The pizza room and or the cafe is not in on this right now.
So a question for Krish and Bob, perhaps. So if we choose not to go ahead with phase 5 and 6, roughly 100,000, if I'm hearing it right, Krish, do we have the freedom to then use that for any other purpose? Or are we restricted in some way because it's coming from deficiency funds?
The way I can answer it is we have signed a contract that says we'll use the funds to fix construction defects. That's the way we signed the contract. Okay, and different people on the board have a different view on that, but the way we signed the contract is they expressly written that the funds will be used for construction defects. So as long as it's a construction defect, and that's what we can do, we can reallocate the funds for construction defects within those amounts. My view, the way I was coming from is really, I don't think the timing or whatever discount we think this person has given us should dictate whether we do it now or not. It's really the need-based kind of a thing is where I'm coming from. If there's a need that this wine teaching room is going to be used, so let's assume it's 27 and we don't do it and they increase it by 10% more or 20% more or 30% more. Fine, if it's going to be used that drastically, then we can do it because then we generate the money we are spending. We are spending hard cash right now. If they're not going to be any place, we're generating revenue out of that room for the next couple of years. That's all I want you to all to think. I think we're spending hard cash, which could be utilized for other purposes if that room is not going to be utilized to a significant effort. So if price goes up, price goes up. If that's what we want to do, we spend the money then and correct it.
Thank you. Any other discussion? Wait, go ahead.
We have a couple questions online. Jean Levine, once the bar and dining area acoustics are upgraded, will that not improve the wine room also?
I think the wine room having walls is a separate building, and I don't think there's going to be much impact based on the results and study we've seen thus far.
And Fred Snyder made a similar comment that said, we have been in the wine room for several wine pairing dinners, and it was not that bad. If the sound is mitigated in the bar and main dining room, it should mitigate the sound in the wine room. Mo Tazi states, why not use the money planned for the wine room to speed the completion of the dining room? And Karen Eckert stated, small number of people, but potentially high frequency use. High dollar events such as wine tasting, the room is unusable without the acoustic improvements. And then we've got somebody here, homeowner present, that would like to comment as well.
So Frank Harris, Krish, I appreciate your diligence around good use of our funds, really do. It seems to me, though, that by the time we realize there's a need to do the wine room later on, we would have already missed out on revenue-generating income. And it's one of these, we're going to leave the Culinary Center half pregnant if we just don't finish the project. So it really does make sense. Get the whole thing done. I have been in the wine room with, I was in there, there were about 9 people at the long table for the wine tasting. It is hard to hear from one end to the other. Not that our residents are very quiet to start with, but this would probably help quite a bit. So it seems silly to have to come back to the whole thing and spend the board's time, get another quote, and do it all when you could just vote it here and be done.
Nate, thank you.
Kathy Drobny. I would just like to also reinforce, I think this is the time during COVID that we have the time to do that. I have been in that room for wine dinners. We have used it for signature events. We have used it for buffets. So I think you have to stop thinking of it as a teaching room and a wine dinner room. It's wonderful flex space down the road when we can open up again. That it should be done, and it should be done now. $27,000, $10 million budget. Thank you.
Thank you. We have another one? Another person?
Yeah, John Drobny. I support what Kathy said, but what I think you got to also, those of us that were part of the group that did the evaluation with Biller and Carpenter, myself, and Bill, and several others, you raise a good point, but I think what you got to keep aware, Bob, is that
Hey, John, would you get closer to the microphone?
the worst noise level was the bar area. By our experience, and we know it. When you talk about later phases, I definitely would hold them up beyond that room, because you're going to probably have to go back. If you pay the $2,000 for this reverberation and the decibel and everything else, noise level, it's not going to be enough, because we're really guessing at the material that was put there, and there was no scientific calculation. The original modeling is really an abstraction of reality. It was never validated, the model, with real world noise from the people there. So knowing the bar is the revenue generator, those later phases, 5, 6, especially, Alan, like you said, the hallway, hold that money in reserve, because whether you can do any more in the bar area is still questionable, because the contractor, I'll say firsthand, is doing a wonderful detailed job. But that 1-inch thickness is only going to reduce real noise by a very small amount. And if we don't get people that can talk at the bar, it's going to hurt us big time in the revenue generation. So just think about the later phases. I would strongly recommend reallocate more after you test the bar area, just whether you're going to do something different. You're limited what you can do, but you would like some testimony of how much did it really reduce the sound level when they do the calculations.
Thank you. Any other discussions?
There are a couple more on the live stream. Stephanie Turner is asking, could we screen in a portion of the veranda to reduce the volume in the dining room and bar area, and perhaps add heat lamps outside? B. Gill is stating, having attended a wine dinner in this room, it needs acoustic improvements. And I think we're good.
Thank you. All right, we don't have any further discussions? Then we have a motion and a second. No, we have a motion. I'm going to say we're now ready to vote. Those in favor of phase 4, wine room for $27,000. All those in favor signify by raising your hand. Aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Next.
Okay, these next two, I'm actually going to reverse the motion, because we have phases 5, which is hallways, for $40,000, and we have phase 6, which is the entryway, the foyer, for $30,000, for a combined total of $70,000. I'm actually going to make a motion that we don't do those, and we delay that until later on and evaluate, maybe with some testing or some further evaluation to see whether it's necessary after we get the other areas done. That's the motion.
Do we have a second? Discussion.
I guess the only discussion would be if anybody is adamantly against it and thinks we should do it.
I'm not. No, John, you got to get to the microphone. Thank you.
That was done by the consultant, but I strongly recommend what Bob's saying. People don't congregate there. It's not an issue. It was just done by the original guy earlier in the year. So I think Bob is right on. Hold that in reserve. And I would say if it was out of your pocket or mine, I would never do it.
Thank you, John. Any further discussion? Those in favor of a motion to not proceed with phases 5 or 6 at this time, please signify by raising their hand. Aye. Motion approved. We will not do phases 5 or 6 at this time.
Outside the motion, Bob, I have a question. Would it pay to have them do us, not a study, but give us an estimate for the pizza room? I mean, while we're doing the eating facilities.
Sure. But before I do that, I'd probably, Alan, bring in some of the people from the infrastructure group, including somebody like Bill Wolf, and just get some input from people other than myself who might have more background and say, is it worthwhile? Or did they consider it? And if not, why not? But yeah, I mean, we can certainly follow up on the pizza room, and we'll have some money. Now that we've rejected doing phases 5 and 6, we have money if we decide we do want to go forward with that.
I think that's a good idea at this time because the construction of the pizza cafe is still going on, and we need to get that settled and then make a determination a little later. But that could be a good follow-up at another time. Yes, Tessa?
Ruthie Zagrabski just wanted to comment, I would think we should proceed in doing the acoustic. However, should we wait to see how well the acoustics work in the bar and main dining room first, post-COVID, of course? Is that all of the acoustic contracts? We're ready to move on?
That's it.
All right. Next item, the driving range expansion.
Bobby?
Thank you. Get my mask off and all my other stuff. We are asking for the board's consideration to approve the driving range expansion project. The project scope of this work will expand the driving range to achieve 10 additional spots in the front of the driving range as you're facing the lake. The expansion will go out to the right of the driving range. Again, like I said, it will add 10 spots, hitting stations to the front of the driving range. Also part of the scope of this project, we would be adding artificial turf to the back of the driving range. We think this would be a significant improvement and would give us the flexibility in very wet conditions to be able to have a place to hit and not ruin the actual driving range. There's also, we could probably in the summer go a day or two on the mats just to give the turf extra time to recover. So there's a lot of added benefits to that. Aesthetically, I think it'll look really well. We've got this scope to do brick pavers around this artificial turf in the back. The artificial turf is high quality. I'm very familiar with it from other places I've worked. You can actually put a tee in the artificial turf, so it acts just like turf from that standpoint. And with the nice pavers around the artificial turf, it would give us the opportunity to put some benches probably around. I know we've been internally talking about getting the flex lawn back up to snuff, and people could watch people hit down there as well. So Moondragon has said that the estimated time of completion on this project from the time of start would take about 3 weeks. So I think, Chris, you mentioned earlier, if we could get this approved now, we could get it done essentially before we get into the peak season.
Bobby, did I hear you say what the price of the project is, please?
What's that?
He did. Moondragon has given us a quote for $50,000, 135. $50,135.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thanks, Bobby. We're gonna need a motion before we have a discussion.
So I make a motion to approve the driving range expansion as Bobby outlined and begin in 2020.
I'll second that motion.
All right, open for discussion. I guess my first question is, do we have the funds? And number two, will it be done before the season? You can answer the first one.
The funds this year can be made available when you see the September monthly report. It'll show you that in the golf we have about $45,000 and odd, just September year to date, available for use. All I want to do is make sure we're all aware that if you spend that money, because we're planning to spend it for something else, that something else then will get moved out into next year in the January beginning, because that's the basis of the budget for getting some reductions in operating costs. So we have to spend that money in January to do the other project when it's brought forward.
Okay, so what I'm hearing from Chris is that we have the funds for it this year. However, the budget has projects for golf for next year, but you identified a project already that's yet to be determined.
It's not been brought forth fully yet, but that'll be brought forth. So we'll approve it in January, very early for that one.
Okay.
So that we can then get the operating benefits of having that project done. But I
Al?
think that timing-wise, there'll be money available to kind of spend this as quickly as Bobby and the rest of the team are ready.
All right, Alan, you have a question or a comment?
I assume at $50,000, that's going to be a capital expenditure. And as such, why can't we use the improvement funds, the deficit funds?
I'm going to defer to Chris. I think the capital funds. Go ahead, Chris. Good.
We do not have, first of all, that much improvement funds available for pardon? You can't use the construction defect funds.
No, cannot.
This is not a construction defect for every definition.
No, it's not.
So all we're trying to do is, adding spaces is not a construction defect. That's the first thing, okay? So the other thing is, if it takes longer recovery, which is the point that's going to get enhanced, what Bobby was bringing up. So we have to hit an area that's not that well maintained. So you can't call this a construction defect by the definition.
Any further discussion?
I'm just following up on Alan's, and it's somewhat related. He brought up the construction defects funds. I think when you look at all the list of items we're going to do under that and what the estimates were and what it may cost, it might be wise at some point to get a legal opinion on the contract and say, okay, when we're done with all these projects, we have a bucket of money here. What can we do with it? Okay, and do we search out additional construction defects, or can we use it for other? We certainly need to get that resolved. I'm going to say in the next quarter or so. Not tonight, of course, but
I think, and I think we mentioned it before, the contract for the construction defect settlement was reviewed by council, and he confirmed that we have to use it specifically for construction defect matters that I already identified. So that's the conundrum that you get into. And if at the end of the day we have construction defect money left and there is no construction defect that we would use, it just sits there until that's about it. Is that correct?
So two things. One is we got a legal opinion. The second major issue, more than legal, is taxation. Tax. Okay, so we have got the input from our auditing firm that clearly said we have to use it also for construction defects, and they've prescribed how they have to be capitalized and all that requirements that's put on. The only requirement from the auditing or from an accounting basis is that we spend this money as quickly as we can, as I hope you all remember the conversation we had about that. So So that otherwise it's a significant tax impact on the association if you don't follow that. So I think we got to be careful, just not only on legal. We should make solid business judgments based on that. I think we have enough things to do, actually. And I don't think that will be an issue of worrying about not having enough projects. It might take, instead of 2 years, it might take 3 years. If there's any impacts because of doing that, then we'll address them with both legal and accounting in that time.
Alan?
RSM only said that it had to be used on capital expenditures, had nothing to do with defects or anything else.
Right.
So I'd be interested in a legal opinion as to how that money has to be used, because I believe we have more flexibility in it.
Can I add something? In many discussions we had on those questions with Dick Biller in particular, he translated. What? Okay. In many discussions with Dick Biller, 2 months ago, my understanding, as he repeated, is pretty much everything you're saying, Krish, has to be staying in that list of constructions. In the event there will be any additional monies left over, his interpretation of some discussion, whether it was you, Steve, or the lawyer, was repeatedly said to us, the easy place that you could put it was into the road bucket. Because we know that we were looking for several million with the road bucket for drainage, and I think you got 400,000 or so out of the 1.28 million. So he claims that that was clearly discussed and decided shortfalls go into roads. So I'm just letting you know that was something he brought up a few times, and I think it makes sense. And I think Krish was aware of that.
Thank you, John. That's true. We put away $500,000 already for future road construction defects that may come up, and if it does, that's where those funds will be used. So those funds will be used when that occurs, and it may be more than just right away, obviously.
I'll add in that following what you just said, Steve, is that because of, at one point, Dick had related it was a 2-year horizon. Then because of somebody's decision with the attorney to move it, any remaining 10,000, 100,000 into the road bucket, we know the roads was additional fund for that 500 was going to be beyond the 2-year window. So I'm just saying this is conversations that trickle down to the infrastructure group that some of you were aware about happened with the attorney. So I'm just relating, which I think was clearly stated by Dick Beller. Is that not true? Or?
I don't know. And we got to be very careful here, okay? I just got to be very careful because of the tax implications of if you make a wrong move in this thing, this could come to bite us very significantly. So I would even prefer not to discuss a lot of this thing in an open meeting because they can call for the meeting notes of this meeting, actually, because we're trying our best to say how legally can we stay without paying a tax on this amount. I think that's the prime importance in this whole thing. So if they come back after 2 years and said, we got to use it for some other purpose, then fine, we're going to use it, because their recommendation is to use the money as quickly as possible. They were also even suggesting to use it for reserve funds and don't spend the reserves as an option, that if you wanted to take use of that, but to spend the money in timely fashion.
Because if you have to spend it sooner, you got the road situation you don't need today, but
We
you are
understand.
going to need it.
Yeah,
We understand.
understand that. Thank you.
I believe this board has been prudently been developing the list of construction defect items, and we've utilizing our process through with ICON to identify those. So this particular motion has to do with current operating funds, not construction defect funds. I just want to clarify that before we go forward for a vote.
If I can say something, it's anybody, and I'm going to go back to the practicality of doing this. Anybody that has played golf, specifically in season, knows that it is a thriving pain in the butt trying to find a good piece of grass to hit from, how much that driving range was used. The ability to put in this mat will allow Mickey and his crew to maintain that so that it can be much better for the golfer. So to me, it's somewhat of a no-brainer, because having been on that driving range and you're trying to hit out of the 7 guys that were in front of you, their divots, is no fun when you're warming up.
Any further discussion? Thank you, Jim.
There are a few online questions. Are you ready for those?
Yes?
Okay. Karen Eckert has stated, what is the useful life of the artificial turf?
It will vary. I would say that from my past experience, 4 to 5 years is probably the life of an artificial mat that's getting used a lot. And if I can just comment on what Jim just said too, I can speak from experience at Innisbrook. We had a similar challenge with turf, with the amount of play that we would get. And the mats turned it around in 2 weeks. It really made a difference. We went mats only on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday when we started. We ended up going back down to just Mondays and Tuesdays. And in 1 month's time, we went from, as you described, Jim, looking for blades of grass on the range to having really nice turf. So just wanted to add some context to what you said. It really does make a difference.
Thank you.
John Hermes is asking, were other quotes obtained for the practice range?
Yes, we received multiple quotes, 3 in total, and this was our best one. And there's actually some other benefits if we do some of the other projects as well for additional savings.
Phil Stevenson would like to know, what is the impact of the expansion, i.e. loss of other practice facilities such as chipping areas?
So I can take that, Tessa. There will be no impact to the practice area, to the chipping area. The mat will be placed along the back of the driving range, and the expansion will primarily be at the front of the range, with approximately, I think Mickey said, 4 to 5 additional hitting spots on each side.
Perfect, thank you. Jean Levine would like us to clarify where the funds for the driving range expansion are coming from.
The current plan right now is going to be coming from the operating income fund that's left. In the golf area, generally it'll come from the golf assessment funds remaining. That's what we're proposing to utilize at this stage for 2020.
Okay. Thank you for all the discussion. We'll have a vote. Those in favor of the expansion project for the driving range, including the mat and pavers, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Next, Tessa.
The next project that we would like the board to consider does fall under the construction defect list. And this is to address the drainage on number 10 as well as the erosion on number 15. The scope of this work is to correct the erosion that is happening on 15. And this would be installing a retaining wall 3 foot high by 2 feet wide along the right side of the cart path. This will block the water and debris runoff that is currently causing this erosion. We would also install a 12-inch inline basin along with a solid pipe for proper drainage along the right side with a new wall with 4 catch basins. Between the cart path and this new retaining wall would be a 2-foot gravel area that would serve and act as a French drain. And then we will sod this area once the work is complete. I would like to continue on with the drainage work on number 10 along the right side of the hole by the green that backs up to the condos. We would like to remove and relocate some of the vegetation that is blocking the drainage that is in the bed. It's actually in really heavy summer rains cause water to actually back up, getting really close to the condos. and we've received an all-in quote for the work on 15 and 10, again from the same vendor. That would be a cost of $27,500. And by doing this now with this vendor, we would save $5,000 in mobilization fees, because they would just charge us the one time instead of 3 separate $2,500 charges. So this would address the erosion that is happening on 15. This would also help the homes that back up to that hole. Again, you know, some of the drainage issues that we're addressing here are very similar. They all have a common denominator, that we have large beds and vegetation in these drainage areas. And by removing this vegetation, putting sod, it's going to allow the drains not to clog up when we get these rains. So it's just going to be a win-win all over the. So that is our request.
Do we have a motion? Moved.
I make a motion that we approve the drainage repairs at hole 10 and also the erosion issue on hole 15.
I second the motion.
We have a first and a second. Do we have discussion? I just wanted to remind, the discussion point is, Bobby mentioned that this is part of the construction defect funds, so that's where it will come from. And having all this done at one time save us $5,000. So you're talking about a multitude of projects with the same vendor. Okay. Any other questions?
I know you said it, but I didn't. The total amount we're talking about approving right now is how much, Bobby?
$27,500.
Okay, I got that right. Okay, very good. Thank you.
Any other discussion? If none, then let's vote. Those in favor of the erosion project on 10 and 15 signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Tessa.
Okay, we had a couple of questions that just kind of got lost with our delay here, or were maybe more generic in nature, that I just wanted to share with you this evening. Jim Betke stated, can the recent decision regarding single rider carts be visited to see if some accommodation can be made for golfers who might not be comfortable sharing yet? Just asking for consideration.
I'm not sure that was an agenda item.
It's not, but it's just homeowner forum where they can make comments. So it's just a comment. We don't have, it's not for discussion or comment necessarily, just sharing that with you as the board, okay? Mike Coslow is asking if we are no longer using the golf committee. No longer using the golf committee.
Is he referring to the CART program?
Yeah, I think that it
discussion?
came in shortly after that, but we had already moved on.
Okay,
So yes.
yeah,
So
I
it
can
was-
answer that. So yes, we did consider the golf group's proposal, which included a discounted cart fee. What we wanted to do was get additional data from other bundled communities to understand, are there other discount programs offered by other communities, bundled or private, and more fully explore what those look like. So were they trail fees, as I mentioned earlier, personal cart trail fees, or just some sort of frequent user discount program? So we did consider that, but when we looked at the RSM data and the Beekman report, we found that our cart fee at $23 was one of the lowest in the area. The average with Beekman and RSM is around $24 or $25. But we did, based on all the feedback that we received on the cart fees and offering some sort of program, we did feel that we should take a deeper dive, which is what we're planning to do with the task team that I mentioned earlier.
Thank you. Tracy Vagran is asking, is it possible to see what it will look like on hole 15? We paid a lot for these lots.
Yeah, we do have a sketch that I'd be happy to share. It's not a detailed rendition by any means, but it is a sketch, and I'd be happy to share that.
Bobby, just a suggestion. It might be best that between you and Mickey, you hold a meeting with all the homeowners along the path that are adjacent. Whoever wants to participate at one time instead of doing it repeatedly, so that might help them understand actually what the project is going to do. That way they can help support you and also get a comfort that they know what is going to happen actually before you start the project.
Yeah, that's a good idea. I think that's a really good idea.
I think we've captured all the questions on the live feed. Were there other comments or questions from the in-person audience present this evening? No? By the shake of heads, it looks like we're good. I think so.
I'd like to make a motion that we adjourn this meeting.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Meeting adjourned. Thank you, everyone. Have a good evening.